Hey everyone, this is Mike, and today we're going to be talking about Summoner in Shadowbringers, the job that seemingly does it all. It has good personal DPS, it has a raid buff, it still brings extra raid utility in the sense that they can resurrect people. They're a caster, but they're also still very mobile. I would even dare to go as far as to say that they are the most mobile caster out there, so Summoner seems to be in a pretty good spot. But when it comes down to learning how to play Summoner, there are a lot of things that you also need to learn, because outside of just having a lot of good things going on for itself as a job, there's also a lot of things that you need to learn if you want to actually play Summoner well, because Summoner has a lot of different moving parts. You have your trances, you have your Demi Summons, you have your pet, which has the pet actions that then work together with your ruin skills, you have damage over time skills, you have the Aetherflow system. Did I miss anything? I think that's about it. So there's a lot of different things that you need to know about Summoner. Some of these things work together with each other, like for example the pet actions work together with your ruin skills. Aetherflow is like its own separate system, kind of. It feels kind of tacked on at this point, and I would not be surprised if it gets deleted going into the next expansion, because it doesn't really have anything special to offer to Summoner itself anymore, like it does for Scholar at the moment. And then of course the trances work together with your dot management as well as with your Demi Summon. So there are a couple of different systems in place that do need to work together, but there's also a couple of ones that are kind of separated from each other as well. But somehow there is still a rotational flow that you are going to be following as a Summoner. So I'm going to try my best to explain all of the different mechanics behind Summoner, so to speak, because not only do you need to learn a lot of things about how to play Summoner with all of these different mechanics I just talked about, but there are also some clunky mechanics that you need to learn how to work around as well in order to play Summoner correctly, because unfortunately enough, Summoner is a pet job. Pet jobs, or just the pets in general in Final Fantasy XIV, aren't the best out there, so there is a little bit of clunkiness going on there. Need to know how to work around not ghosting certain actions. If you don't know what ghosting in action is, basically you press the button goes on cooldown, but the damage doesn't happen, or you don't get the benefit from what that button was doing, which of course is going to be resulting in a DPS loss, sometimes in even some other things as well, like a DPS loss for the raid, if it was your raid buff that was to ghost, because your raid buff comes from your pet. So if you press the button and then all of a sudden you transform your pet into Bahamut, for example, your pet doesn't have the time to execute the raid buff, then it just won't be there, and Bahamut will just be derping around a little bit. So there are some things that you need to learn how to work around with Summoner. I won't go too much into detail about those. I do believe I covered them in my rotation guide on Summoner, so if you want to learn more about the rotation in depth, with all of its different mechanics, how you should be working together with them, you can go check that one out. This one is more of an introduction to what Summoner is, all of the different mechanics, what they do, and then also kind of tie it together with a general rotation flow as to how Summoner kind of works together. So first of all, let's talk about the general flow, because Summoner is actually quite straightforward when it comes down to its rotation flow, and everything else kind of falls into place if you follow this general rotation flow. So first of all, we have our trances. These are the things that allow us to summon the big boys, Bahamut and Phoenix, which are the two visually very appealing summons when it comes down to playing Summoner, and I think that they really nailed the Summoner aspect of the job this time around, because you're going to be interacting with your pets and your Demi Summons quite a bit in this current iteration of Summoner. So we have our Demi Summons that come forth from our trances. So we have our Dreadworm trance, which after we exit our Dreadworm trance we can summon Bahamut. We have Firebird trance. This one immediately summons the Phoenix when we activate the trance. It's kind of weird that they are two separate mechanics, so to speak, but that is kind of some leftover spaghetti code, I'll just say, from Stormblood, where you would need to exit Dreadworm trance twice and then be able to summon Bahamut. Right now in Shadowbringers you only need to do that once, but it's kind of still some leftover stuff from back there. I would not be surprised to see a small rework going into the next expansion, where using Dreadworm trance would also just summon your Bahamut the same way it does with Phoenix right now. Now, outside of just giving you access to your big summon, the trances also have another thing, and that is that they reset the cooldown of Tri-Disaster. Tri-Disaster is a really important skill, because this is the main way that we are going to be reapplying our dots. We have 2 damage over time abilities, and we can just apply them normally by using Bio and Miasma, I believe they're called, but you basically almost never use those skills itself. We are mainly going to be using our Tri-Disaster to apply apply our dots. Now the thing about Try Disaster is that it has a 55-second cooldown. Our dots last 30 seconds, so you might be like, well, we can't always be using this to apply our dots. And that is very true. There is one point in our rotation, our 2-minute cycle, where we are going to be hard casting our damage over time abilities, as I like to call it. So generally, you're going to be using Try Disaster when it is possible. You are then going to be using your hard casted dots to reapply them. By that time, you're going into your Phoenix trance, but your cooldown will also be up again, so you use Try Disaster to apply them, Phoenix trance to reset the cooldown, meaning that by the time you need to reapply them again, you still have Try Disaster ready, and then by the time that you need to reapply them again, Dreadworm trance will be up, so we can use Dreadworm trance to reset Try Disaster's cooldown to then again apply our dots using Try Disaster. So we're basically going to be working together with using Try Disaster 3 times in this 2-minute cycle to apply our dots, and then 1 time where we are going to be just applying them manually by using our 2 dot skills themselves, those 2 GCDs. Now, outside of that, we still have our pet actions and our ruin skills. Our ruin skills are basically our filler GCDs. These are the things that we're going to be pressing when we don't have any other buttons to press. We have Ruin 2, Ruin 3, and you guessed it, Ruin 4. Now, Ruin 3 is our normal standard casted GCD, so we're basically going to be using this one as much as possible when we can stand still. If we do need to use off-global cooldowns, if we do need to move, that is where Ruin 2 and Ruin 4 come into play. Now, Ruin 2 is the basic version of the ability. This one will always be available, but you want to try to use this one as least as possible because it is a damage loss to use Ruin 2 over the other stuff that we have. Now, luckily enough, we do have a lot of other instants available to us, Ruin 4 and also our Eggy Assaults, which are our pet actions. Now, every time that we execute an Eggy Assault, one of those pet actions, we are actually going to be getting a stack of Ruination, and this stacks up to 4 times. And whenever we have Ruination active, our Ruin 2 will be upgraded into Ruin 4. And Ruin 4 is also our strongest like normal filler GCD that we have. So it is even totally worth it if you don't need the movement, if you don't need the spaces for off-global cooldowns, to just use an Eggy Assault to make sure it doesn't overcap, and then just use a random Ruin 4, even though you didn't technically need it, because it is still going to do more damage than a Ruin 3. But in general, if you're new to Summoner and you really don't know like your movement around the fight just yet, just save those things for your movement. And then once you realize that your pet actions are coming up and you're like, oh, I still have 4 stacks, just use a Ruin 4 once or twice, and then you can use your pet actions again, and they'll just give you the Ruination stacks right back again. So those are those 2 mechanics. We have our Ruin skills, which are our fillers. We have our dot application that is mainly going to be done through using Try Disaster. And then of course we still have the 2 big summons left to talk about. First one is Bahamut. This one is summoned after our Dreadworm trance, as I said before. When we go into any of our trances, all of our GCDs, pretty much all of our GCDs, become instant cast because it reduces the cast time by 2.5 seconds. So it's only our normal GCDs that are getting an instant cast time. It is not our resurrection. That one will still have its cast time reduced by the 2.5 seconds, but it won't be instant like, for example, a red mage using dual cast. So we will, for the most part, be very mobile during our trances. Now, when we go into Dreadworm trance, this doesn't really do anything special for us anymore, outside of just resetting Try Disaster and also granting us those instant casts for movement. But in general, we're going to be going outside of Dreadworm trance very quickly by using our Death Flare. This is kind of like our like trance ending move, so to speak, the big beam of light. And then we are allowed to summon Bahamut. You can just press the Summon Bahamut move, and then Bahamut will be summoned. Now, generally, when you go into the Bahamut summon, you want to do one thing, and that is that you have prepared some Ruin 4 stacks. In general, you want 4 stacks of Ruin 4 ready. You can also do 3 stacks as well as a Swift cast, because we are going to need to use some instant casts during Bahamut. Now, whenever your summons are out, either Bahamut or Phoenix, you can't use your pet actions anymore, your Eggy Assaults, because your pet transforms into the Demi Summon. So because of that, we want to have some Ruin 4 stacks prepared for when we go into Bahamut, because otherwise we're going to need to be using Ruin 2s, and of course, as I said before, Ruin 2 is a damage loss compared to using anything else really. So that's why we want to have some Ruin 4 stacks prepared for when we go into Bahamut. When it comes down to Phoenix, we don't care about anything like that at all, because when we go into the Firebird trance, our GCDs transform into Phoenix actions. We'll actually just be commanding Phoenix to attack for us pretty much. Which is really cool, and I really hope that they kind of would have done that with Bahamut as well, but here we are, maybe for the next expansion. And that is really all the important things that you need to know about Summoner. You use your Ruin skills when you have nothing else to do. Your pet actions will generate Ruin 4 stacks for you, so you can use that Ruin 4 skill if you need movement, if you need off-global cooldown weaving. We have our Dreadworm trance, after that we summon our Bahamut, we have some downtime, then we have our Fireburst trance, during which Phoenix will automatically be summoned. We have some downtime, we repeat the cycle. When it comes down to our dot application, first we go into our Dreadworm trance, which will grant us our Tri-Disaster, if it was on cooldown or not. So we use our Tri-Disaster there. After we have summoned Bahamut, or during the Bahamut summon, depends if you've delayed it or not, we can reapply our dots manually by using the GCDs. Then right before we go into our Phoenix trance, we can use Tri-Disaster, Phoenix trance right after to reset the cooldown of Tri-Disaster, so that the next time we apply it, we can do so with Tri-Disaster. And then by the time that we need to reapply our dots again, our Dreadworm trance will be up again, meaning that we go into Dreadworm trance, we get the reset on Tri-Disaster, so we can use that again to reapply our dots. And that is basically the general cycle of Summoner. You're going to be going through your trances, using your dot application like that. In between the trances, you're just going to be using your Eggy Assaults, your Ruin skills, try to just keep everything on cooldown. And then last but not least, we of course have our Aether Flow mechanic, which comes from Energy Drain. When we use Energy Drain, we get 2 Aether Flow stacks, which we can just use on either a single target skill Fester, which does require both of your dots to be on the target to deal full damage, or we can use an AoE skill called Pain Flare. And that is really it. So I almost forgot to talk about it, purely because of the fact that the Aether Flow system of Summoner right now is kind of forgettable in the job, and I would definitely not be surprised to see it go in the next expansion. But that's basically a quick rundown of Summoner. There's definitely a lot of different moving parts in the job that make it seem very confusing to new players for sure, but once you've learned its general rotational flow, once you know all of the different mechanics, once you know how to also work around the pet summons and that kind of stuff a little bit as well. I know I didn't really go into detail about them in this video, but as I mentioned, the rotation guide for Summoner pretty much has all of those things explained in there, so you can go check that one out if you need some extra information. But that's pretty much going to be it for me. So if I forgot to mention anything, feel free to correct me in the comments down below. If you have any extra questions, feel free to ask them down there as well, and I'll definitely get back to you. But that's going to be it for me. I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank my Patreons for supporting me, and I'll see you in the next one.